Hello, everybody. Welcome to our webinar. I'm Stewart Gandolf, and I know some people are still clicking in here, but we have so much to cover. We're going to go ahead and get started. I want to start off today. We've got a lot to talk about how to gain a competitive edge through sophisticated healthcare marketing. Some housekeeping things. First of all, there will be a recording of the call available. So you can expect that if you've registered, and if you have colleagues that want to see the webinar afterwards, you can forward that over to them. We will have a brief Q&A at the end, so that's coming as well. So if you have notes. Thirdly, there is a participant question Q&A section that you can respond to. So Paul and I will try to see those as we're moving through the presentation. But if we don't respond in the middle of the presentation, make sure you just bring it up when we get to the Q&A side. Today, I'm excited to mention that we have, this is a joint webinar today. Tim DeCoo is an old friend of mine. We've been working together as professional colleagues for a while. And so Tim leads or is a principal for the healthcare group and maybe the leader of the healthcare group at Hardesty LLC, and also leads his own educational program, the Healthcare Financial Network of Orange County. Tim, welcome. I know we have your audience as well. Just say a few words, if you would, about your organization, what you guys do, and then we'll get started.
Yeah, welcome to see everybody. I'm the managing partner of Hardesty. We're an executive management services firm. We have 50 partners around the country. We worked in over 40 states. Our focus is more what I would refer to as the lower middle market. The services we provide are across the C-suite. Our partners are former seated professionals, CEOs, company owners, et cetera. The services we provide are interim, fractional, special project, and also permanent search. Healthcare is about half our business, and we have a focus in medical practices and also early stage life science device companies. And always happy to do this with Stewart. We've done this, it's become an annual in a very well-received event. But let me turn it over to Stewart and Paul.
Great. Tim, thanks a lot. Really think highly of you and your group. There are leaders here in Southern California and far beyond. So if you guys are looking for any of these kinds of services, I urge you to reach out to Tim and his team about those kinds of things. So thank you, Tim. That's great. I appreciate your participation in the webinar and sharing this with your audience as well. So I'm looking forward. Okay. So for those of you who don't know me, I'm Stewart Gandolf. I'm CEO of Healthcare Success. I've been doing this a long time, and I'm happy to be leading the group today. Paul is a key member of our team. Paul, I'd love to have you introduce yourself and talk about your unique combination of passions before we get right into this.
Yeah, thanks, Stewart. Great to be with all of you today. I'm Paul Knipe. I'm Director of Client Services at Healthcare Success. I lead our account team and work very closely with all of our clients to make sure that our marketing programs, our digital campaigns are as successful as they can be. I also have history as a brand strategist, and I'm very passionate about connecting brand strategy to digital campaign success, whether it's with paid search, SEO, or paid social. So looking forward to delving into some of those connections today.
Great. So just a second about our company, just so you know that we're for real. We founded this company back in 2006. We've got about 40 people. We are one of the largest remaining independent agencies in the healthcare space, certainly on the kinds of work that we do. We're on the medical marketing and media agency top 100 list. And we are truly integrated, meaning very, very deep in strategy, branding, digital, traditional advertising, HCP referrals, PR, all these kinds of things are what we do every day. So that's the sort of attitude and depth of knowledge we're bringing to this. Today, we're going to go through, I mentioned I have way too much, very aggressive agenda today. Paul and I will do this anyway. We're going to talk about the big picture and some of the strategies that we think are important today. And I'm going to cover this. I'm just going to jump straight into it. So why are we here, really? Well, the first thing is I speak a lot at private equity events. In fact, my team right now is at a private equity event without me today, as well as healthcare events. And the one thing I've noticed over the past, decades of doing this, but particularly since maybe 2020, is that healthcare executives are certainly focused on many things they should: revenue cycle management, recruiting, creating de novo locations, adding service lines. They have, it can be SaaS companies we work with, device, pharma, a wide variety of needs. But broadly, there's exceptions, of course. A lot of healthcare companies just don't really see the value of marketing. They know they need to do it. They look at it as an expense. And they oftentimes just kind of underestimate the power of growing the business. So I know we have a very broad mix of financial people today and healthcare leaders on the call today. And I'm going to ask you to suspend disbelief a little bit and let me share with you some of the ways you can impact your business in a very positive way through marketing. Change is never ending, as you guys know. I just went through this little pandemic thing. You may remember that. It wasn't very long ago, and that transformed all of healthcare. I would argue today, though, given the changes we're seeing, that excellent operations and financial management are very important, as they've always been, but I would argue that's table stakes. And really, today, sophisticated marketing is a lever that's going to offer you an opportunity to get a strategic advantage. And finally, this is a big title we had here for this meeting today. I'm not going to teach everything we know. There's lots of great things going on I do not have time to cover. But instead, I'm just going to cover some of the things I think will be most relevant to our very broad audience, to give you a sense of what's going on out there. But feel free to follow up with us or ask Q&A about your specific issues. First thing is, I've been talking about this topic for years. I remember speaking about this topic at the Patient Experience Summit with Cleveland Clinic back in, 14 years ago. And this was new thinking at the time. Nobody was really thinking about the consumer experience or patient experience at that time. Now this is everywhere. And I just want to give you the thought and reminder that healthcare consumers are who we're targeting, not patients. So we may use healthcare consumer and patient interchangeably, but really recognize they are consumers. They've got lots of options. They demand convenience that they get everywhere else in their life besides healthcare. And those that aren't getting that vote with their feet. So we recognize today, by the way, that we have businesses with both B2B applications and B2C. So if you're on the B2B side, rest assured, I'm going to cover B2B in spades a lot later on. About half our presentation will be B2B for it. So don't get lost here. But if you're on the consumer side, just recognize that people are digitally enabled, they're empowered, they have huge expectations, and retail and healthcare is irreversible change, and it just will never be the same. So we can't go backwards. Consumers are driving their own decisions, just like HCPs of old. The consumer journey now is exceedingly complex. So when we meet with clients talking about the journey, I just got off the phone today, minutes ago, with a consumer direct medical device going after consumers. And we were talking about this exact issue. Our current agency is focused on just the middle of this funnel, or the bottom rather. They're not thinking about the broader picture. And today we need to think about our awareness. How do we get awareness of what it is we do, whether it's B2B or B2C? How do we reach them during the consideration phase, the decision phase? Paul's going to be talking about one of our favorite tools today, Google Ads and paid search, which is one of many, as you can see here. How do we deliver the right experience on the back end? And how do we establish loyalty? So it's complicated, and it's more complicated every day. And oh, by the way, your competitors are watching this and thinking about these things too. So I would say one of the biggest things that's happened, in the old days when I used to talk about this live, I'd say, well, competitors out there, but don't worry, they're pretty terrible too. That's not the case anymore. You have to think a lot about competitors. They're coming after, you guys saw that movie way back when, they want to drink your milkshake. So you want to really think about private equity, venture capital, corporatization. There are many larger players out there in the marketplace that are looking to encroach upon your territory. Typically, they have deeper pockets. Typically, they have more savvy for business and marketing. We are very often engaged to help, as the marketing agency, and the client will say, hey, can you help us find a new marketing person? What level should that be? Because they're thinking about that. And your agency, if you have one, needs somebody competent and credible that we can throw the ball to them and they throw it back to us. So this is really an important development now. It's far more sophisticated than it was even pre-2020. Things like I know I have a lot of financial people on the line today. Things like tracking, analytics, attribution. You're probably, wait, they're talking about that? Great. Now you're talking my language. So that's really important. We'll try to touch upon that later. So, and the last comment here is business models are evolving. There's new players all over the place, particularly with telehealth and various other models. There are disruptors all over the place. It's an exciting time, but perhaps a little bit of a scary time at the same time. So finally, before I turn the ball over to Paul for a while, um, given that we're a marketing agency, hopefully this may help you think a little bigger if you haven't thought of some of these things. But we're often talk at the opening phases with a relationship of, okay, how do we create marketing systems at scale that are predictable, profitable, passive? Another business I talked to today, multi-location physical therapy. This is today, guys. This is sample my world. Where we're talking about they've got a really strong business development team of physician liaisons. And I mentioned that this idea of B2C marketing is a whole new venue of opportunity for them. And just imagine when you have the B2C side work with the B2B, that's a fundamental business model changing attribute. How about differentiating our business from competitors through strategic branding? Paul's going to talk about that in a moment. Very, very often it's about, okay, we bought a bunch of these businesses, whether it's practices or other businesses, how do we integrate them and grow them? Or if we're a provider, how do we do de novo launches? Or how do we ease the older doctor who's phasing out into our brand? How do we grow service lines profitably? How do we support field sales reps back to that B2B? Or how do we grow the business for eventual sale? These are at the adult table issues. These aren't at the kids' table. These aren't like, well, let's just do a couple social media posts. This is driving strategy for the business forward. And that's the part we're talking about today is how do we use marketing in a more substantial way that moves the business forward, not as just something, well, we got to do it because I guess we have to do it. Paul?
Yeah, let's dive in. So talking about a brand, right? I feel like everyone has a concept of what a brand really is. And we're going to walk through the basics of what we call a living brand. Before doing that, and before even advancing to the next slide, yes, a brand is in many ways those basics. It is the visual part, the logo, the messaging. It is the color system you use. It's the way you apply those things. When we talk about a living brand, we imagine and often get excited about the possibilities of a brand system that's responsive to customer needs, to strategic needs, and that can shapeshift as necessary, retaining the core qualities of the brand that make it strong while also flexing and being able to adapt to the needs of specific strategies, audiences, and business goals. So next slide. I think that there are challenges when we think about branding. All the reasons that Stewart mentioned, it's not always the case that new generations recognize industry-leading people and brands. It's always changing. It's an environment that adapts and needs renewal on a regular basis. When you think about all of your audiences, all of those segments, the patients, the providers, executives, internal teams, and then the entire ecosystem of audiences surrounding them, what is their perception of the brand? How does that influence their decision-making? And as Stewart mentioned, there's just such a loud sort of ecosystem of different entities that make it hard to break through. They get lost in this short attention span and the digital landscape that we have. And this is why a living brand and some of the concepts that I'm going to walk through in a moment really are important for consideration. A brand is not, shall I say, an isolated, hermetically sealed thing. A strong brand strategy is the foundation you need for a coherent marketing strategy across multiple channels. So is your brand still relevant? And what are you using to define that? Because it's sometimes the case that what we think is a strong brand actually has some opportunities for improvement. Next slide. So this is a quote that gets to the heart of something that I think is very important when we think about good and strategy. Yes, a brand is a logo. It is the messages. It is the color system. But it's incomplete to think of a brand as simply a tangible, concrete thing that you can point to. It often is many things that the brand or organization does to reflect its personality, its character, its values. And when we think about it, our impression of this online app or this system, this hospital or this urgent care provider, in many ways may come down to how convenient it is, how clear the offerings and services are, and ultimately those are brand propositions. The clarity, the positivity of the experience is ultimately what can create a positive brand experience. Next slide. When we think about this idea of a living brand, let's go through some basics. So it's important to highlight the analogy of a tree like this, okay? The idea that you can have a foundation with a trunk that captures some basic, ultimately rooted values and elements that the brand has to remain consistent with is important. But the concept of branches or leaves or natural growth is really useful when we think about ways that brands need to adapt and can shift to meet the needs of specific marketing channels, specific audiences, or specific corners of the message that we need to deliver. More than anything, it's very important that internal stakeholders and audiences feel that the brand reflects them and that it speaks to them and that it's responsive to the way that they interact with the brand. We have many clients, whether they're multi-location practices, hospitals, digital health providers, even some very large national and global brands, manufacturers, that all view their brand expressions differently. But all of them do consider how the brand and its master strategy plays out across all channels. Next slide. When we think about the way I was describing the basic concrete elements of a brand, we can consider that as a static way of looking at a brand. And a static brand demonstrates sort of a cookie cutter approach to every channel. In other words, the logo may always look the same. You're using the same color palette across every marketing channel. Maybe even the same message appears when you're even trying to reach different audiences. So a static brand can sometimes be very limited. Even as it's true to its core, it may not be responsive in adapting to the needs of different channels or groups you're trying to speak with. It has a basic tried and true system that you can use and that you can apply. But in contrast, a living brand system is designed to anticipate the unknown, the new, and the exciting parts of how you can reach your consumers. In other words, those things that we see as concrete, the message, the color, maybe even the execution of the logo, can really shapeshift and adapt in exciting ways in a living brand system. Next slide. So what does this mean? Let's have a real world example here. So Google, it's one of the most recognizable brands on the planet, right? But Google very early on started taking steps to flex and adapt its visual identity. This basic Google logo with the primary colors quickly over time became, I think, versatile enough to shift to support milestones, holidays, historical events. And these executions you see in the lower half really do reflect the creativity that Google has tried to bring in expressing its brand. Now, it has a lot of the privileges that not every brand in the world has. It's highly recognizable. There's a deep, deep level of brand equity in Google's visual identity. And that allows them to play with it in ways that not many organizations are able to do quite as extensively as they are. But it's interesting to think about the basic principles of what they're doing. They are abilities. We want our brand to reflect a certain ethos, a certain playfulness, and a certain inclusion of everybody. So if we just stuck with our straightforward primary color logo, it may not necessarily have that engaging sense of discovery that ultimately is one of Google's brand pillars. So this is a good example just as a starting point, but I'll go into a little bit more detail. Healthcare Success has a wonderful brand strategy team, both in terms of developing the brand foundation, the visual side of things, and the messaging. And one of our clients, Plasma Source, is a plasma donation center based in the Chicago area. We developed their brand, and the color palette the visual execution and the messaging has all been exciting in how it's been flexible to interchange messages and for us to almost use the full name, Plasma Source, to use a diminutive, the PS, as we'd like to in different executions. But we're also recommending that the client play with the execution a little bit, that there be, I think, variations in the color palette that allows it to have a freshness and to have that sense of discovery that's so important for a living brand. This brand continues to drive a ton of success for this client, and they are looking forward to expanding into 10 cities over the next few years. And I think the strength of the brand has been a big part of how they've been able to engage plasma donors in Illinois. Another example, a client for many years with healthcare success was Synergenics, testosterone supplement client. We worked with them to develop paid social, a website, and a range of integrated marketing tools. But one of the coolest things about working with this group was that we took the X from their name and really extrapolated it as a visual abilities that we used across different executions like this. In other words, how could we take an element of the brand, a memorable element of the way the brand sounds, the way it resonates, and really bring that in to creative that's meant to reach our target audiences, athletes, men and women who want to live their best lives at their full potential. So taking the basic brand pillars and extending it with this X, with these different color variations, was a way for us to let the brand sing, to let it adapt, to let it explore that curious and unknown possibility for people that would be fresh in digital ads, website, or other channels. Next slide. Healthcare success, I have to say, we use this living brand system and these principles very actively in our own content marketing. As you can see from each of these examples on the left side of the page, the healthcare success logo is not any one color in each of these. The ability, the strength, and the integrity of that logo lockup, the HS, remains consistent, but we vary the color according to the execution, and we have fun with the different tones, personalities, images that we place our logo against based on the topic at hand. Having the flexibility to play with the brand system like this is something that our creative director, Brett Maurer, just is very well versed in. He has a real instinct for how a brand can adapt visually to meet the needs of our communication. Because if we only took a very straightforward, rigid approach to our brand execution, it would be dull. It wouldn't necessarily land or resonate with people the way that this more flexible living brand system does. I'll walk through some basics here. So a living brand, imagine this scenario. Your healthcare brand colors, they're black and white. Everything is black and white because that's what your visionary brand system dictates. So social ads, they may use that color palette. Next slide. But if we look at how that extends, black doesn't really do well in every marketing channel, obviously. Social media advertising, it's flat. It's not going to stand out. If there's contrast, that's great, but instead of using colors that don't work well, like the core elements of your brand system, how could we adapt to something that's more vibrant, where you can retain the elements of your brand, but allow it to live with color variations that may be more appropriate for the marketing channel that you're working with? Next slide. If you think about it, this notion of defining a living healthcare brand and the ways that it could adapt in terms of color, photography, messaging, a living brand allows for shifting for those results. Things you didn't necessarily design initially, you want to make your brand flexible and to adapt over time to different circumstances. If you can imagine, let's think about all of the elements that really can help you think about a living brand. In other words, these tips for building one. First, you stay relevant. You have to understand exactly how well you're connected to your communities. You need to be connected to what's important to them, their values, and their expectations, as well as their pain points. Second, we have to make sure that the brand's message and visual identity are not overly static. if they are static, you may lose those opportunities to personalize the message. So the more that it can have that flexibility, it's really important. And then third, I think that to be a real living brand, it's important to be relevant and engaging. You have to adapt your message, your color palette, to things that are relatable to your audience's interests, their needs, their concerns. And having a brand that can do that and understands ultimately what your outcomes are and how your messaging and creative can meet that will succeed with these first steps. Next slide. But a living brand also has to adapt appropriately. It's like any of us if we're in different social settings. If we're at a party, if we're at a sporting event, if it were one of our children's sporting events, we're going to be slightly different while remaining true and having our core integrity in place. We adapt based on who we are and our comfort and flexibility based on the audiences that we're talking with. So the visual identity needs to be fluid. Part of adapting appropriately is we want to make sure that the brand can tailor itself, that it can adapt appropriately to whatever channel. If you're talking on a podcast, if you're sharing an Instagram ad, how does the visual system change or the messaging change appropriately? As you've seen from Healthcare Success, we do this actively with content marketing. Next. So we talk about the word authenticity, and it's overused in some ways, but a brand has to be authentic because consumers, patients, audiences, they really can smell when there is something that is not necessarily true. It doesn't mean that you throw out your core values to be a living brand, to be flexible. But I think you have to think about demonstrating authenticity by defining and capturing guidelines that demonstrate and document your visual and your messaging in ways that I think show how you adapt across channels. I think that it's also important that your brand be relatable, that it be an extension of your values. And those values are part of what you define during an initial brand strategy phase. Next slide. So, as I mentioned, a brand is a theoretical concept, but it should be the foundation of everything you do. And when we think about digital marketing, I want to go to the next slide to explain exactly how a lot of the things that we've talked about should trickle down and percolate in all of what you do, no matter what your marketing channels are. But there's often a feeling that digital can operate at a bottom of the funnel, get people right when they're able to make their decision, and you don't need to think about your brand very much. The challenge is people who do define their brand positioning, their unique stake in the ground, how they're different, how they're better, how they provide offerings that no one else does, they will always have stronger messages. Those messages are at the core of anything you do with paid search advertising, with content marketing, and also with SEO. So not all platforms are created equal, and only some will be right for your brand. But the truth is that if your brand positioning and strategy is solid, you already have an automatic competitive advantage when you think about how you set up your ad campaigns, how you position the architecture of your website, and ultimately how you create a voice in your online social media presence. So you should be using all of your brand strategy insights, your positioning, your audience, your competitive landscape to shape your keyword targeting and geographic strategies. Next slide. So one of the things that Healthcare Success does so well, building upon brand strategy that we build for our clients, is paid search, essentially Google Ads. And as Stewart mentioned in that long trajectory, we have, I think, at our core, an incredible amount of success with paid search. I'd like to walk through paid search as a basic concept in a little bit more detail and then talk a little bit about how AI has transformed the ability to actually target and deliver results in ways that are cost-effective for our clients and their success. You can go to the next slide. So, okay, AI is everywhere. I feel like I'm using it all day, every day now. And it's down to the point where, my partner and I compare notes at the end of our work days around, did you use Claude? Did you use Gemini? Did you use ChatGPT? And now they're aggregating tools that give you results, combining all of them, obviously. It is something that creates great efficiency. It also is something you have to monitor and proofread very closely. But photo editing, ideation, I really feel like it's an incredible tool if you know how to harness its power. It's also revolutionizing how we put our bidding strategies together from a digital marketing standpoint. So next slide. But what does that mean? Stewart talked about paid search, and I talked about that. And if we think about Google Ads, paid search basically allows advertisers to appear on the top and throughout search engine results pages, SERPs, along with organic results. We see this every time we're online. Advertisers only pay when searchers click. That's the pay-per-click acronym that we always see. And your position on the page, your ad rank is calculated based on your quality score, the expected click-through rate, the ad relevance, the landing page experience, the bid amount, and other factors. It's really important that ability to be a strong connection between the ads, the user's intent, and the ultimate landing page or website where you're pointing users to click to. Google looks very, very closely to make sure that we're not hoodwinking anyone, that there's an appropriate relevance, and that's something that healthcare success is particularly skilled at balancing. But Google Ads is by far the dominant player. Microsoft is a close second. A lot of these AI tools are going to be introducing their own search engines very soon, so that's going to be a crowded landscape. It's going to be very interesting to see how things work. Whether we're on our phones, tablets, desktop, we know what these results look like. Everyone sees these results, and it's an auction. It's a bidding system based on a lot of the factors I just mentioned. And like I said, how you position yourself is an extension of brand strategy. But how AI works together, paid search, is really important. There are a lot of tools at our disposal, and they're just getting better over time. Some specific terms to maybe take away: Performance Max is a campaign type that uses AI functionality. It basically has signals within a campaign that can make recommendations for you. We often use smart campaigns to use local data and AI-informed ad serving. That's often really appropriate for clients who want to take advantage of multiple Google channels, have a very limited budget. There are also smart bidding strategies like maximize conversions, maximize clicks, and maximize conversions with a target CPA. We really do feel like we're learning. But what AI does is it often takes the data and serves recommendations and provides results on the basis of what is succeeding. So we don't have to do that manually. Again, work in progress, but it's become an essential part of how we do our paid search.
All right, excellent. Paul, excellent job, Paul, as always. And why is it not advancing? Oops, too fast. All right, so Paul's going to take a little break, and I'll join for a while. Paul, excellent job, right on time, everything, good job. So I'm going to take the B2B section, and I mentioned at the opening here, a lot of our clients are B2B. They're not really marketing directly to consumers at all. So we have both, and a lot actually market to both audiences, both B2B and B2C. But I want to talk about B2B and share with some things that for us are everyday kinds of activities, but may be new to a fair number of you. So first of all, inherently in healthcare, we know that marketing to doctors, HCPs, other healthcare professionals, executives is difficult. And providers in particular are insanely difficult, right? Everybody wants a piece of them. Device reps, pharma reps, real estate agents, jewelry salesmen, realtors. Everybody thinks the doctors have money. Everybody knows doctors have influence. So everybody's reaching out to them. This was before pandemic. Of course, now the doors have slammed shut. There's access is even harder now because of corporate, practices just say no at the door. So it's harder and harder and harder to reach anybody in healthcare, especially doctors, but really anybody. Everybody's protected. Everybody has gatekeepers. It's a thing, right? And what do you think it'll be next year? Harder. So to make matters more challenging, if you're talking about more complex B2B sales, almost always a complex decision-making process, long sales cycle. I mentioned my team is in Charleston. It spoke a fair number of them at a private equity conference. We'll be making relationships there that may result in a new client in the next week or two, but more likely maybe a year down the road or two. There are long sales cycles here. Very fragmented audience. Healthcare is still pretty fragmented. There's niches. Everybody has, it's funny. Paul referred to a couple of our clients. We have a very, very prominent brand name in the consumer packaged goods category. And you would think that they have big budgets, and that's just not the case. Just because they're big doesn't mean they necessarily have a big budget. Um, Educating and empowering buyers. Like all of these things are things that are really key to the folks of on our call today that are going after either hospitals, going after pharma. We've had other manufacturers going after doctors, recruiting doctors, recruiting staff. All these things are out there. So if you remember early on, we shared the consumer journey on the consumer side. Think about almost the same thing on the B2B side. And what we talk about internally a lot is surround sound marketing. I want you to keep that concept in mind. Surround sound marketing means we're going to make the job of your sales team a whole lot easier, whether it's physician liaison, detail reps, or whomever, by being in front of those doctors, being in front of those executives all the time. Like, okay, it's not so easy to knock on that door anymore, but we'll be there in other ways. So really, when we get into B2B, couple things. One is it requires investment. When I hear people say, okay, we want to reach 100 doctors this month and can we cancel if it doesn't happen? Like, okay, B2B marketing isn't for you. It requires investment and a long-term perspective. But when you have that, magical things can begin to happen. So typically, Paul mentioned paid search. That's, oftentimes part of our media mix when we're going after B2B. Paid social, programmatic display, and geofencing. We'll talk about some of these things a little bit later. Content marketing, offers, direct mail, email, trade shows, congresses. All of these things are ways to reach your providers or your target audience. One of the things I always talk about with new and prospective clients is the bad news is there's only 5,000 people in the entire country that would appreciate what you do. And then I say, the fantastic news is there's only 5,000 people in the entire country that you have to target, right? You don't have to be Coca-Cola and have everybody know you, just those people that matter. So that means that in B2B, it's all about that database. How do you get the database? Do you release the database? If you're going after physicians, we work with IQVIA as a primary provider and some others. These are, investments into these lists, but they have incredible amounts of data, prescription data, treatment data, referral data. So the data is really the key. And then we usually rent or lease list. We usually build to that with our salespeople. We do inbound marketing, but that B2B marketing all begins with the database. We want to think about our CRM and our marketing automation. And that takes to the next level. So, a lot of companies kind of dabble with this, but almost nobody does a very good job of taking advantage of their marketing automation. It's more like a dumb email. But true marketing automation will help alert your salespeople when interested prospects are consuming your content. It can provide them, oh, you like this? What about this? It can respond to people when they're hot. It can help identify people when they're much more likely to buy. I could do a whole hour on marketing automation easy. I don't have time for that today, but marketing automation at the heart of it is a way of reaching your doctors through or other providers or other executives through email. You can do it through text, direct mail, integrate that with your CRM so you can see what they're doing, what your sales reps are doing, and it becomes very powerful. Key concept a lot of people don't know is that today an email address and other information can identify doctors on a one-to-one basis. So today, or other people, anybody that you're trying to target. So if you're going after every NT in the country and you have a list of all those people, then you can target them as they travel online, on LinkedIn, on Facebook, on social media, on Fox Sports or NewYorkTimes.com. So this is an incredibly powerful tool on a one-on-one basis. Typically, we can match between 60 to 80% of your audience online as they travel about. I'm flying through this today because we have so much ground to cover, but LinkedIn has tremendous opportunities. We see that right about coterminous with the decline of Twitter, LinkedIn has just become a thing in B2B marketing. It's far more powerful than it was pre-pandemic. There are social media strategies with LinkedIn. How do you build thought leadership? There are paid strategies. There are recruiting strategies, content strategies, advertising strategies. Again, this is probably a topic of a webinar another day. This would typically is a combination of working with your marketing team, your sales team, prospecting, LinkedIn just has mad availability, but again, most people underestimate the potential for advertising. We often advertise for, we have pharma companies we advertise, uh, multi-location practices, consumer packaged good companies, all targeting people on LinkedIn. So this is a deep, deep area of opportunity. I alluded to programmatic advertising, and programmatic advertising, essentially, if you're not familiar with it, is a way of, in the old days, you would hire a media buyer to talk to the radio station and the TV station in your town, maybe a newspaper. They would negotiate a contract. But on the internet, there's millions of potential places to advertise. So human beings can't contact a million advertisers. So instead, this is all done digitally through networks, and it's called programmatic advertising. And essentially, it's a way that we can reach anybody, whether it's consumers or B2B audiences, again, as they travel about online, virtually anywhere. This is a very sophisticated topic that we can talk about if you're interested in, but things like Spotify or Pandora or native advertising embedded within the news or display ads or video ads. And you can even advertise on TV, which I'll come back to in a second. One of our favorite programmatic strategies is to reach your target audience when you're doing trade shows. This is called geofencing. So, for example, we've done this many times for clients where they want to target, for example, oncologists at the Community Oncology Alliance. We can target people in that building while they're milling about and afterwards on their cell phones on a one-to-one basis. So you can see that the sophistication of marketing that's out there today is so much more. Again, we can't teach you everything we know in the remaining 20 minutes of this webinar, but just letting you know these things are out there to target these individuals on a highly, highly specific basis. I mentioned CTV. On different platforms like Hulu, you can advertise and you can even target doctors or executives while they're watching TV at home or different other streaming capabilities out there. So it's just amazing what's possible. This gets pricey as you start doing all these things, but they're all possible. And depending on your strategy, like the key thing is, how does this fit all together? This is just an example of some work we did for AmerisourceBergen. It's a leading company most of you probably know if you're in healthcare. This was exactly what we just described, doing it both with social and programmatic, where we were targeting an oncologist at the Community Oncology Alliance in this case. This obviously works for any trade show or any different format. Also, the really interesting point, Paul was talking about living brand. They came to us with brand guidelines. They said, follow these brand guidelines. Then we showed them back what they wanted us to. And they said, can you make it better? Right, Paul? So they give us the opportunity to do some living brand work with an established company like that. And we'll be working with them again soon, I'm sure. This is another sample campaign to show you what's possible. This is a white paper ebook we wrote for a company called BioT. And the point here was to create the science along with the motivation of why bioidentical hormones are not only ethical, but something that's unethical if you don't provide it to patients. So this was just the culmination of a huge program with blogs, ebooks, white papers, podcasts, infographics, and just walking you through. This was a combination of ads that were targeting them online, through Facebook, through programmatic, being able to reach exactly the doctors we wanted to grow the interest and generate leads from these doctors throughout, in this case, was a California program where we had lead forms, programmatic advertising, email. This is examples of, over here we have a mailer that we sent to people. We created trade shows, dinner meetings, ongoing, ads, many touches, all driving to landing pages, generating leads. This is the marketing automation, sending bounce back emails to the doctors that we're targeting, and of course, alerting the sales reps. I'm going to talk, I think for the sake of time, Paul, I'm going to talk about analytics a little bit, and then I'll turn over the HIPAA to you. All of these topics, again, as I said, are very deep, but I'm just trying to give you a flyby on some of the things that we're doing with state-of-the-art marketing today. So every client, we've been doing analytics and testing and recording calls for years, really since we began inception. But the key to successful marketing, though, is optimizing your ROI and looking at data. How many people clicked? How many people inquired? What is your conversion ratio to actual customers? Do they buy? Um, it's different kinds of analytics are different for different kinds of clients. We have e-commerce clients, clients working with doctors just looking for referrals. Others are looking to sell services. Others are looking to get patient inquiries. But all of this should be available on a 24-hour platform, housed, accessible data like, not just how many exposures, but how many people called, what's your return on ad spend, how many people clicked, off of organic search versus social versus paid social versus any other source. Again, 24 hours, this should all be available. And this is table stakes. This isn't that new, but I think, and Paul, I'll return the ball to you in a second here about how this is interpreted and how you and your team do this. Also, HIPAA compliant platforms have been out there for a while. I just talked to a potential new one today. So, being able to actually monitor calls, if you're answering calls at the office level or through a call center and you've never monitored your calls before, I suggest putting some pillows around your chair just in case when you start listening and you fall out, you don't hurt yourself, because it's usually pretty scary what you're going to hear. And so, but you can't improve what you don't understand and don't know about. Well, I'd like you to take a moment before we talk about the HIPAA side of this, just to share maybe a minute on how this works in the role with our clients and what that you recommend just in general to demand for analytics and reporting.
Yeah, it's very important. When we talk about tracking, performance tracking for our campaigns, the ideal scenario is that, we could identify every single appointment that comes in from our campaign in partnership with our client, connecting systems on the client side with the ad platforms that we're using to run. But the truth is that sometimes our clients don't always have the right infrastructure internally. And from a call monitoring standpoint, that's where we can fill in the gaps. If we have the ability to see what calls come in from our campaign, what form fills come in from our campaign ads, and then we can partner with our clients to actually identify the conversations that are taking place to determine what we can attribute to our campaigns, but also issues that come up along the way. Sometimes patients may have expectations for what a clinic, a provider, a hospital is actually able to provide, but they don't do that. That can be useful for us because it can help us negate terms in our campaign strategy that may be confusing to users in the future. It can also be very useful if we can see the phone manner and the ways in which intake comes to a practice so that we can offer suggestions and best practices for onboarding prospective patients more successfully. Yeah, we're going to talk about HIPAA compliance because this is something that is somewhat recent in the last couple of years and that our agency has to take very, very seriously. So, I think there are links that our team can provide for the highlighted areas here if you're interested. But in 2022, the Department of Health and Human Services, Office of Civil Rights, clarified their guidelines of what constitutes personal health information. And essentially, I'll get into this more in a moment, they determined that IP addresses, those identifying IP addresses, constitute personal health information. And anytime any of us go online, visit a website from a device, whether it's a phone, an IP address identifies us. This ruling and this clarification of guidelines is really important to those of us in the healthcare digital marketing space because it essentially means that if we're using pixels from Google, from Meta, Facebook, Instagram to track user behavior, which is essentially how we are able to do a lot of the tracking and data analysis that we do, that is no longer HIPAA compliant. So it's an industry-wide issue that is affecting healthcare providers everywhere. Essentially, the initial ruling was that if you are using a Google Pixel for analytics, for ads, you are not in compliance. So we have, as an agency, developed a solution that I think is worth talking about in some detail. Next slide. When we think about the fact that IP addresses are considered PHI as part of this guidelines clarification. And those pixels are at the heart of why that tracking is problematic. What do we do? Well, there are a lot of possible solutions. One is spend a few $100,000 and have a team of engineers develop a solution that extracts the pixel, but still allows you to use some other mechanism to gather user data. We found a great partnership with an organization called Fresh Paint, which is a Bay Area-based strategy team that has essentially found a way to extract the pixels from these ad platforms and replace them with a code snippet that then stores all of the user data in a HIPAA-compliant server. So we've been able to successfully roll this out to a number of our clients. It allows them to carry on, to be HIPAA-compliant using digital marketing tools. And it basically means that we just need to establish a BAA with these clients, and in some cases, encourage our clients to establish a more robust contract with Fresh Paint if their user base, if their monthly users on their websites exceeds a certain level. So we're pleased that this solution is there. It really is important because when we think about all of the things that Fresh Paint does, it's essentially a way for us to protect our clients and also allow for the integrity of the data analysis we need. So thank you for hearing out that last HIPAA piece. It's certainly a moving target in some ways, but it's nice to have a solution.
Beauty. Happens to me too. I would just add to that the recently, if you're following along on this particular topic, Paul mentioned this first became, well, HIPAA has always been an issue for as long as I can remember, certainly since a long time, 20 years more. But this particular issue of digital tracking technologies really became in the spotlight back in 2022. This year, there was a ruling by a district court in Texas that is calling into question just the specific IP address, but everything else remains. I should say there's also class action lawsuits out there. This is a deep, deep discussion. It involves more than just CHSS, the Department of Health and Human Services. It involves the FTC. So if you're concerned about the HIPAA issue or the privacy issues, there are answers out there. In terms of questions, we don't have any yet because we do have some nice compliments though, Paul, so that's cool. So Paul, while we're waiting here for questions, I'll keep the questions and the answers open while we're waiting for any questions. So let us know if you guys have any. Paul, I think, what I'd like to do is, just because you're such a resource, you're on the ground with the clients more closely than I am these days. I'm up at the 50,000 foot level and you're maybe at the 40,000 foot level with you and your team, but certainly working day in and day out. Let's talk about, I want to put you on the spot here, but any of the innovations, like today was really about, I guess, innovation in healthcare marketing that our audience may not be familiar with, and also maybe just the power of marketing that may be lying beneath the surface that, they kind of don't understand. So maybe some anecdotes, anything at all, some more stories, something to keep our audience entertained here as we come to the last couple minutes.
Yeah, and I think one headline in response to that broad topic is you have to constantly be ready to embrace change, because what worked 3-4 years ago may no longer even be operative. And I think that examples, that I think have emerged maybe post-pandemic are now just entrenched as tools that as strategists on the marketing and brand side, we have to think about. I think the notion of personalized marketing is an innovation that's emerging quickly. And it's basically this concept that we could tailor messaging and services in digital marketing channels to individual needs, and how that could become increasingly important. It could involve using data to create targeted campaigns that resonate with specific demographics. I just love that kind of possibility, and AI will certainly play a role with that. I think that telehealth has emerged across many sectors of healthcare, from our work in mental and behavioral health, even to urgent care, multi-location practices we work with. And one of the real opportunities is not just to say the word telehealth, but to really talk about the emotional and practical benefits that could have. That's a brand messaging opportunity for many organizations. It's not enough sometimes to recognize shifts, opportunities, innovations in technology, you have to think about what it means from a practical and emotional level for your audiences.
Awesome.
So,
sorry, go ahead.
just a couple of quick ideas. I think it's always important too to recognize that sometimes the old-fashioned ways of doing things sometimes has value too. We love to balance our digital work with traditional where we can, radio, print, direct mail. Sometimes it's just where the rubber meets the road. So we'd never leave that off the table. As an account team, we're always looking at every channel we can recommend to our clients to succeed.
Great. And Tim, I'm glad you popped back in because you guys have such a variety of clients. And I'm curious if you have any comments or questions. And like, you brought us to this meeting today. Why do you think this is valuable for your clients?
The classic in healthcare is we have some, uber smart people, physicians and scientists and, engineers, and many of them just don't get the marketing side.
Yep.
They're not trained that way, but they're the smartest people in the room. We love them as clients because it's always fascinating and it's always something that, it's great to learn, but there's a great opportunity to be able to present it better and communicate it better. And boy, that's the future is reaching people on whatever level you can so that you can connect with them and they can use your service.
Yeah, I appreciate that, Tim. And, it's funny because one of the things that's just fun about having done this for so long is just, I feel like when I'm working with people like that, I can finish with sentences for them often because I know their world. Like today we were talking to the PT group, and I was mentioning that I bet your PTs are a little shy of working with the MDs. Like, how do you know that? That's absolutely true. It's like, because we've just done this so long, that knowledge base is so deep. And so the idea there then is to be able to, recognize where the business is, recognize what the objectives are. And I'm just arguing that in most cases, there's an arc where the marketing can be a real, the marketing we're talking about today, the more sophisticated, thoughtful, strategic marketing is more than just running some social media ads, I'll give you another example. Maybe I'll refer these guys over to you someday, but I have a big multi-location business in LA that we'll probably work with in a couple of weeks here. And, he was mentioning to me, they're great. I really like them. And they were saying, we've got social media. And I asked why. I'm like, great question. You should ask that, right? There should be a reason behind everything you're doing, not just because you think you should. And so, again, you have the right to demand more and you should demand more, but that opens up opportunities.
Definitely. The other thing I would add to that too is I loved your comments on the call centers. What is critical to us in the healthcare practices that we see is to pay attention to every source of communication you can get on your business. It's just you can't just be focused on one silo. You need to have keep your eyes and ears open, head on a swivel.
So my metaphor on that as we wrap up here, Tim, is that we see it every day. Somebody drives the ball 98 yards down the field. They're at the 2-yard line. We got the marketing to work. They're on the phone. They finally inquired. They want to book an appointment. And the front desk goes off and leaves the game and goes orders a pizza or something. And you lose the game.
Yep.
Like that's
very good
metaphor. Like it's like at the last second, you had them all the way to calling you, and you blew it. So it's a big deal. We're the only agency I'm aware of that actually has trainers that we bring in. It's not a big revenue center for us, but it's so critical to the success of our clients. We even bring in trainers to help with that. And today I spoke to a friend of ours, Kathy Gaughran, who's is a consultant who builds call centers for people if they need to do this on sort of an organizational standpoint. So that's just, again, the way we do things. Guys, we're out of time. Tim, thank you for introducing us to your audience.
Thanks,
again.
everybody. Look forward to seeing you next month.
Yep, good deal. Thank you, guys.
Bye-bye.
Thank you.